Welcome to another devlog for the indie game I'm making with the Godot game engine. In this video, I'll share the progress I've made with adding a simple UI system for my game and the basic command post for the player to defend against enemy tanks. My near-term goal right now is to finish a working prototype of a single level. This will let me test if all these components that I've been building actually result in a fun game when combined together. For now though, here are the updates that I've added to my game since the last video. In my game right now, the player can press the spacebar to fire a shell from his tank. This also starts a reload timer that the player has to wait for it to finish before firing the next shot. From the very beginning, I've had a sound that plays when the reload timer finishes. This is supposed to signal to the player when the next shot is ready. However, I realized that when there are a lot of enemies in the map, all of them shooting off their own guns, it's hard for the player to hear the sound of the reload timer finishing over the din of battle. This can make for a frustrating experience where the player presses the spacebar but nothing happens because the reload timer is still running. I knew I had to add a visual representation of the reload timer that the player can see. I originally added this down here at the bottom of the view, but after testing it a bit, I felt it was still too hard to tell when a shot was ready because while playing the game, a player will typically be focused on the player's sprite while the action was happening rather than down here on the HUD. This is when I thought about the health bar in Deadspace and how clever it was for the developers to add the progress bar on Isaac himself. This made me realize that I also have a nice convenient spot for a progress bar on my player's character. So I added a texture progress node on that part of the tank sprite with white textures. I added a lighter shade of blue to the undertint and the tank's normal blue color to the progress tint. I then tied this to the reload timer in the tank script. So now, the player has a visual indicator of when they can fire the next shot right on the tank itself. I only enabled this for the player tank though, because I don't want the shot timings of the enemy tanks to be predictable. The next feature I added is a command post. The primary goal of the player in every map will be to protect this command post from being destroyed. Designing this in Sprite is actually what consumed the majority of my time in the last 2 weeks. My artistic skills aren't very good, as you can see. But I think it's also just more challenging to illustrate a building from a completely top-down view without it being just a boring square box. I went to Google Maps to study what buildings look like in military bases, but most of them seem to just be rectangular boxes too. I also studied some more interesting buildings for inspiration. But I definitely wanted the letter CP on it so a player can identify it easily, and I also wanted a shape that will allow a player to respawn from the sides of the building after dying. This symbol in the middle of it is actually the NATO map symbol for armor, which I think is a nice touch. NATO map symbology was something I ended up rabbit holing into on Wikipedia after realizing that they were a thing. Right now I have it where the command post is just erased from the map as it gets hit. I obviously plan to add a much better destruction sequence in the future. But this is good enough for now. When the command post takes 3 hits, the game is over. This game over scene is the next feature I've added. It's really just a simple control node with a texture rectangle to tint the game underneath it. It has a VBox container with 2 labels to tell you what happened, and an HBox container with 2 buttons, one to reload the map and the other to bring you to the main menu scene. My plan for the main menu is to have the game's name and logo here on the left, while the buttons sit here on the right. Only the new game and exit buttons work right now, but I added these other buttons to make sure that they're all gonna fit and look good. I'm using the old web development Bootstrap CSS style to communicate what a button will do via colors. It's been a long time since I did web development, and Bootstrap is probably not popular anymore, but in its default theme, green means a positive action, red means danger, and gray is just default. I also created a slightly different button texture for when the button is pressed to give the player feedback. Alright, that's it for this devlog. In the next video, I'll be working on adding multiple player lives and respawning from the command post after dying. If you like this kind of content, you can subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.